¿cómo decirlo? Pues son muy crudos, muy vivos, cuando uno los lee, tanto de Tatiana como el de Paula, pues siente algo que no se siente siempre en la literatura. Tatiana, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Tatiana escribió un libro que se llama El verano que mi madre tuvo los ojos verdes, publicado en castellano por la editorial Impedimenta, que ha conseguido la unanimidad de crítica y de público por un libro desgarrador, un libro que da gusto leerlo, un libro que duele también cuando lo lees. Y lo mismo le pasa a Paula Bonet, que es también ilustradora, artista plástica, y que ha escrito una maravilla que se llama La anguila, y donde también creo que se ha dejado mucho de sí misma en ese libro, porque cuando lo lees se nota que está escrito desde el fondo del alma y que no hay cortapisas a la hora de expresar lo que ella siente. Y como lector, tanto por Tatiana como por Paula, eso es de agradecer, ¿no? Cuando alguien da todo lo que tiene para que otros lo lean. Quiero agradecer también especialmente a Paula Bonet que haya aceptado esta invitación, que haya venido con todas las dificultades que entrañan, personales, casi también aerolíneas, y le doy las gracias públicamente a Paula por haber sido fuerte para venir a un acto público en Málaga y estar con nosotros, y a Tatiana, por supuesto, que ha sido un descubrimiento no ya como escritora, sino como persona. Le quiero dar también las gracias por estar aquí. Vamos a darle un aplauso y espero que disfrutéis mucho de esta conversación. Muchas gracias.
Buenas noches, gracias por estar aquí. Gracias, Tatiana, por estar aquí, gracias por escribir, gracias Impedimenta por traducirla y por permitirnos leerla. Gracias, la Noche de los Libros, por convocarnos aquí. A mí cuando me propusieron presentar a Tatiana dije que sí de inmediato. No había leído todavía su segunda novela, pero su primera novela me atrapó. Me atrapó sobre todo por la atmósfera. Yo normalmente cuando presento a alguien no llevo papeles, pero presentar a Tatiana me parece algo tan importante y tengo tantas preguntas y tengo tanto miedo de dejarme tantas preguntas en el tintero que lo llevo escrito. Decía que lo que más me interesó fue la atmósfera. Tomé unas notas, hablaba de una atmósfera en la que la angustia y una grisura metálica y hedionda conseguía construir espacios seguros, serenos, espacios llenos de belleza. Me interesó también mucho cómo Tatiana estiraba esas atmósferas y cómo las iba destilando poco a poco, ¿no? Cómo sabía hacer uso de los tiempos para amasarlas y para amasarnos a nosotros y a nosotras, las lectoras, con ella. Yo traía aquí la biografía de Tatiana, pero creo que como solo tenemos 1 hora y cuarto no voy a perder 10 minutos en leerla y vamos a pasar directamente a hacerle preguntas para que sea ella la que hable. Pero antes leeré un fragmento muy breve del inicio del primer libro, de su primera novela, del verano en que mi madre tuvo los ojos verdes. Es un fragmento breve, es un fragmento que cuando yo leí me quedé absolutamente prendada, enamorada, absorta, y que además leía a todas mis amigas, a mi pareja, a cada persona con la que me encontraba. Yo iba con el libro detrás y les leía este fragmento. Estaban cansados y cansadas de mí, y he de decir, lo he anotado aquí para decirlo de una manera así como un poco elegante, que hubo un día... Es que muchas personas cambiaban su estado anímico. De hecho, hubo un día en que 2 amigas se levantaron y se fueron de mi casa. El libro empieza así. Llegué por fin a casa... Perdón, no empieza así. Bueno. Aquella mañana en que la odiaba más que nunca, mi madre cumplió 39 años. Era bajita y gorda, tonta y fea. Era la madre más inútil que haya existido jamás. Yo la miraba desde la ventana mientras ella esperaba junto a la puerta de la escuela como una pordiosera. La habría matado con medio pensamiento. Junto a mí, silenciosos y asustados, desfilaban los padres. un triste atajo de perlas falsas y corbatas baratas, venido a recoger a sus hijos defectuosos, escondidos de los ojos de la gente. Al menos ellos se habían tomado la molestia de subir. A mi madre yo le importaba un pimiento, al igual que el hecho de que hubiera conseguido terminar unos estudios. Dejé que sufriera casi una hora. Observé que al principio se mostraba irritada, caminaba arriba y abajo a lo largo de la valla. Luego se quedó inmóvil, a punto de echarse a llorar, como alguien con quien se hubiera cometido una injusticia. La pregunta yo creo que es evidente, Tatiana. ¿Por qué decides que el inicio de la novela contenga tal carga de odio?
Well, good evening, everyone. First of all, I will start this meeting with a confession. Since I came to Malaga, I had several interviews, and every time the journalists, they're all lovely, by the way, and very well prepared, they started telling me that you are going to meet Paula Bonet, you know. And I said, yes, I know that I'm meeting Paula Bonet, but do you know who is she? She's great, she's fantastic. And then I said, okay, I need to check on this woman. And I checked her and I said, look, she's great, she's more beautiful, she's more famous than me, so why she's interviewing me? I think it should be the other way around. And we briefly met before for a glass of wine with Paula, and I understood that I couldn't have been matched better for this meeting because we have lots in common, and I'm very happy and honored that you are here today with me. I always feel very humble when I come to countries where my book is very successful because I always have the same question, why? Why these people like my book so much? What happened in this country? Why did they connect so well with my books? And Spain is one of those countries. I was astonished at the first meeting when I came 3 years ago, how many people came to that meeting, because I thought it's going to be 10 people and half of them friends of my publisher. But it wasn't that. And I just have this general feeling that in Spain, we speak the same language, we understand each other, and I really wanted to tell you that this is a place which makes me really happy and fit. And I'll try to answer your question, Paula. Why so much hater, you asked me. Because it felt right, I suppose. When I started to write El Verano, I was actually coming back from a summer spent with my father. And for the first time in many, many years, I somehow fell in love with him. You know, I saw that my father, it's an interesting man. He's a nice grandfather. He was playing with my children, showing them the ocean and telling them fairy tales. And I felt that where was this father when I was small? You know, he wasn't there. He was not like that. He was working all the time. He was absent. He was a journalist, like I became later. And I don't remember having such a great time with him as he had with my children in that summer. So I came back, and at the time I was writing a sort of very short stories, very nice and sweet, and you know. So I started writing but I felt that everything has changed in that summer, and I found myself writing these phrases which you just read, filled with hater, and about mother, which we always have been very good friends, in fact, with my mom. And I didn't understand where is this coming from and why is it coming from, but I continued writing. And the best thing is that I never stopped. I mean, I didn't stop writing this book. I wrote it in 2 months, this first novel, and I was just like possessed. I was just writing all day long without eating, without doing other stuff, just drinking wine, but that we shouldn't say. And then I finished it. my publisher from Moldova, who happens to be my friend as well, he just came to Paris and he said, "What are you doing at the moment?" And said, "I wrote something crazy. It can be a success or a complete failure, but knowing my luck, it will be a complete failure. But if you want it, I can give it to you." And I sent it to him, and in 1 month, the book was published. It's a long answer to your short question, but I will just finish. And when I finished that book, I felt that all my fears and all the frustrations and all the unsolved and untold things are there. And I don't know what does it mean for other people, because everyone reads it in its own key. And that is something which I was amazed, that every person finds completely different things in that book. But for me, it was first reconciliation with my father, but also a sort of letter to my son, Alexander, Alexei, how we call him, because I was, for the first time, a mother in that book, in my writings in general. So yes. And one more thing, I remember when I launched it in Chisinau, in Moldova, my hometown, my mom was sitting like that in the audience, and they asked me to read the beginning of a book, and I couldn't. And that amazed me, because I'm usually, a very direct person, but I couldn't look at her and say that the day when I hated her most, she was stupid and fat, because my mom is fat. And I felt that it's so unfair towards her, because this is not her. And for her, that was a constant fight for, since this book was published, she has to answer, thousands of times, "Is it you? Did she write about you?" And she said, she needs to say no, 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 but then maybe she says maybe yes, or so it's a weird situation.
Sí, nuestros familiares normalmente se buscan en nuestras obras y los sufren. ¿Y piensas que el odio era necesario para que ese amor que va cogiendo fuerza, como muy poco a poco, y cada vez se hace más bestia, fuera así de bestia, fuera así de intenso?
I find hate a feeling which is closest to love. Because you can't hate everyone, and you can't hate no matter who. Hate takes a very intimate relationship. You love someone, but you can't hate just anyone. When you hate someone, you invest in this a lot. Just think about the persons you hate most in your life, and think how much time does it take, and how much how close he should be to you, because that person who hates you or you hate is always with you. He never or she never lets you go, because the hate is like love. It takes all the time. Sometimes you're very happy, but you think, okay, what is this Maria thinking now? And I found that this hate came very naturally from me. And the same with violence. People ask me why I'm so cruel and so violent. Until now, my best answer is because maybe I don't want to be like this in real life. So I am in writing. But I think that nowadays, people are demanded to be very good all the time and very correct all the time, and just be good, be better, be the best. And I don't get it, because you can't be like that all the time. People need different set of emotions. You need to scream, you need to cry, you need to be happy, you need to hate someone. But if you are good all the time, it's like you are lobotomized. I don't know how to say it in English, lobotomisé in French. That is not real. And the same with children, there is so much talked about how to be a perfect parent. But then if children don't see the parents like human beings, if they don't see their mothers being sad or unhappy or tired or being in a conflict or being unhappy how they look, how can they grow up normal if they think that the mother is a sort of monument. We are not statues. People are not statues. We have feelings. That's why in my books I just put lots of feelings. I think it's the easiest and most natural way of living the life.
Definitivamente sí, son libros llenos de sentimientos, son libros muy intensos. Supongo que la mayoría de vosotros y vosotras habréis leído ya El verano en que mi madre tuvo los ojos verdes. Quienes no hayáis leído El jardín de vidrio, leedlo ya, porque cuando preparaba esta charla pensaba ordenarla de manera cronológica y abordar primero una novela y después abordar la otra. Y llegó un momento en el que las dos novelas empezaron a confundirse. Son muy diferentes, pero son muy parecidas. Yo estaba absolutamente enamorada del verano en que mi madre tuvo los ojos verdes, pensaba que le dedicaría mucho más tiempo, y es curioso, y antes lo comentaba con Tatiana cuando estábamos tomando el vino, cómo el jardín de vidrio cada vez se ha hecho más grande, ¿no? Y cada vez ha ocupado más espacio y cada vez me ha parecido más importante. Ambos libros tratan las relaciones materno-filiales desde lugares diferentes, pero como he dicho antes, también desde lugares muy parecidos. El verano, pienso que es un libro, no sé qué palabra usar, más accesible quizá por lo universal. Se presenta desde un lugar mucho más reconocible, ¿no? El escenario, los personajes, la luz. Pienso que de la manera desde la que está escrita es más fácil que cualquier lector o lectora pueda volcar su experiencia propia. Pienso mucho en ese campo de girasoles, ¿no? ¿Quién no ha visto un campo de girasoles? Sin embargo, El jardín de vidrio narra un momento muy concreto de la historia, los años más grises del comunismo en Moldavia, un momento oscuro y complejo que además nos lo explica una niña. Nos lo explica una niña que ya tiene bastante trabajo en entender quién es, en construirse, en encontrar su lugar, ¿no? Para esta niña es igual de importante que caiga una bomba en cualquier lugar del mundo y lo destroce que el chascarrillo minúsculo que puede suceder en el patio de su casa. La pregunta es la siguiente: ¿qué importancia tiene lo pequeño, lo olvidado, lo que se supone que no es importante para poder narrar esa tragedia colectiva?
When I wrote the first novel, it was a chaos, right? So in all my meetings, I was asked the same questions. Why did you choose the characters to be Polish? Why are they coming from England? Why the mother is dying in France? So why so much, I don't know, languages, nationalities and things? Why not Moldovan? You are Moldovan, why not Romanian? And at one point I thought, why indeed not? Why did I hide myself, you know, as a writer? Why didn't I want to say, I'm Moldovan, I'm coming from this region? So, and then I understood that it was just me in my conscience just running away from where I was born, from who I am. I just wanted to be seen as a writer, maybe from Paris, cosmopolitan, there, so just forget where I'm coming from. But at one point, I was somehow feeling guilty, and I said, okay, it's not normal. Why don't I want to say who I am? And, you know, why don't I want to make a character Moldovan? And then I started writing this second book as if it was always there in my mind, and I felt at one point that El Verano was an accident. It shouldn't have been my first book. This is the book which I should have written first, because this is me. This is what I lived. I'm Lastochka. Moldova is my country. Why did I start with Verano? I don't know. But I think that without it, nothing would exist. But now to answer your question, I like small people. I like small things. I like small lives. Because every time you say about something that it's unimportant and it's simple and it's dull, you usually can find something which is so beautiful and so interesting that nothing can be compared to. So when I wrote this book, I wanted to talk about my country, but I wanted to talk about people as well. So the best I could do is to find this girl and talk about her becoming an adult, and in parallel talk about the country, which was small and under Soviet occupation, which became independent. And what amazed me is basically that in Moldova's history, I don't know how many of you know what is Moldova, just to make a small annotation. Moldova was one of those 15 republics, 15 countries which were part of Soviet Union, you know, with URSS, you know, like with Ukraine, Romania, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. So when I studied a little bit the main events, I found out something very interesting, that in 10 years, Moldova basically became what it is now. It's not a great deal, but it became, but still it's an independent country. And amazingly, in a person's life, with 10 years of becoming an adult are also the most important. So I made them going together, like this Lastochka being 7 years old and then becoming a woman, and Moldova being a country under a foreign regime, but then becoming independent. And what I liked to do is to show that sometimes political events and things which are around us, they seem much less important for a person's life than what's happening on a global scale, because when you are young and you are abandoned, that abandonment will mean to you much more than a war next door, or the fact that the financial system of a country crashes and you lose all your money will probably at one point mean less to you than the fact that you will have an accident and someone will take your eye off, you know. So from that perspective, I wanted to show that lives of these simple people, as you called them, are basically building up the big story of a country. So of course, this book could be read in many ways. You can read it as a political metaphor, but you can only read it as a personal story. And if you ask me, I don't know if one is more important than the other. It's basically, they have the same weight for me.
Antes hablabas de cómo habías escrito la primera novela, que piensas que, bueno, tú piensas que tu primera novela debería haber sido El jardín, pero hablamos del verano. Yo leyendo ambas novelas veía que tu relación con el texto, con la historia, con la manera de contarla, no era la misma, ¿no? La primera te llega como un rayo, ¿no? Y parece que la hayas escrito como un rayo. Sin embargo, la segunda exige pausa a la lectora, ¿no? Te exige mucha más concentración. Permíteme una metáfora. Yo pienso, ¿no? Cuando me lanzo a leer una novela, en el jardín de vidrio no me imagino lanzándome a una piscina y nadando tranquilamente muchos largos, ¿no? La piscina se transforma en un río lleno de peligros, ¿no? En un río con piedras, con cataratas, con remolinos, y soy incapaz de poder parar un momento y disfrutar del agua, ¿no? y de hacerme la muerta. Y eso me gusta, me parece como lectora interesante y muy atractivo. Si estás de acuerdo conmigo, me gustaría que nos dijeras qué hay de distinto en la escritura de las dos novelas, en la relación que tú estableces con la historia. Esto ya nos lo has explicado, pero con los tiempos de escritura, con la distancia que necesitas tomar o no tomar.
The first novel is a personal novel. As I said, when I was writing it, I was trying to make peace with my own fears, with my own troubles. I was writing it for my son, for the future. I still hope he will read it when he grows up. He's too small for that. The second novel, it wasn't that. It was, I moved to Paris I'm there for like 12 years now, and my children are born in Paris, and my husband is British, right? So, as you can see in my family, it's like Babylon, you know. If you ask very fast who we are, I'm not sure my children will know what to say, because they are French, they are English, they are Romanians, they are a little bit Russians and Swiss. So I was thinking one day, why don't they speak Romanian? Okay, they don't like the language, but shall I teach them Russian, maybe? But then it felt wrong, because Russian was the language which was imposed on me. I still like it a lot, because it's part of my life, but is it natural for me to speak to them in Russian? So when I had those questions, I understood that there are lots of things which I don't know. I just don't know the answer. So I wanted to answer to myself, how much of me is the inheritance, how much of me is the choice, because I choose to be like that, how much from me I pass to them, who do I want them to be? Like, what are they going to say about their mother? And then I also, like, you know, I used to be a journalist for many years, and I still like to follow actualidad. And I found out that lots of people of 40, 50, this age, they are now not even in Moldova, they are now in Spain, Italy, Russia, whatever, because it's a huge migration in Moldova. It's a very poor country. And those people, they feel that they belong to nowhere. They are somehow abandoned because they don't feel like they are Moldovans anymore. They don't speak a very good Romanian anymore because they studied the language which was invented for them. And it's a tragedy, because sometimes you meet people who were teachers or doctors, you know, people who were intelligent, who had their careers, and then they had to go abroad, and now they are just taking care of old people or having nothing in common with having an intellectual work. And I wanted them to read this book, and I wanted us together to try to answer who we are. And I called them the generation in between, because this is the generation who assisted at the collapse of an empire, like a Russian Soviet empire, and they never became really a part of a new life, because they felt that they are, you know, they don't belong anywhere. And it was important for me to understand how much I'm part of this generation, and how do I continue? Because when you're young, you don't think about these things. You just want to be, you know, like rich, probably. But then you want to be only healthy, and then you are over 40, you want also to belong somewhere. This feeling of belonging suddenly became so important for me. And I want to say, this is my place, and I can't still say it. I don't feel that I'm in the right place yet.
Justamente quería hablar de la lengua. Cuando empecé con el jardín de vidrio, veis aquí muchos post-its de colores, cada post-it habla de un tema. Y como llevaba 3 páginas y la lengua ya era un tema importante, bueno, la lengua es el verde. Llegó un momento en el que dejé de marcar la lengua porque me hacía daño en la mano cuando pasaba las páginas. La lengua era como un personaje más, ¿no? Y pensaba, qué curioso, y ahora hablo de mí, ¿no? Como lectora que admira tu obra, porque yo en el 2019 siempre decía, mis libros del 2019 son El jardín de vidrio y Klaus y Lucas, de Agatha Christoph, ¿no? Y justamente también Agatha Christoph habla de la lengua, ¿no? Agatha Christoph, su autobiografía se titula La analfabeta. Es una autobiografía que escribe en francés, que no es su lengua materna. Y entonces os vinculaba a las dos con Clarice Lispector, ¿no? con una frase maravillosa de su libro Aprendizaje o libro de los placeres, que dice: ¿cómo se explica que no soporte yo ver solo porque la vida no es la que pensaba sino otra? Y luego dice, como si antes hubiese sabido lo que era. Voy a la lengua. ¿Es la lengua ese lugar de revelación, ¿no? ¿Es ese lugar en el que se hace más visible las imposiciones contra las que luchamos para construir nuestra propia identidad? ¿Es ese el lugar?
My father, he died last year, and all his life he had a big dream. He wanted Moldova to be reunited to Romania. That was his dream, and everything he did in his life, he just made steps towards that dream, and it still didn't happen. And I grew up with books in Romanian, which is my language and our language, and which I can write my books now, hidden in the house, because at that time we were not allowed to have books in Romanian, because that was declared an enemy language. And what happened to us is that the language we spoke, it was altered, it was changed completely. And then we were given a Cyrillic alphabet. It's like you're taking an alphabet from Chinese, and from tomorrow, Spanish language you speak, it will be written with Chinese letters. So this is what happened to us. And my father, he hated it, he suffered, because he was all his life, you know, fighting for the language. And I can imagine now how much he suffered when he saw me going to school, learning in that language, having a life, and then, you know, becoming old in that language, because for him that was a false language. But he couldn't tell me these things freely, because that would mean that the whole family will be persecuted. And so we grew up in this. And at one point, like when I was about 13 years old, finally we became independent as a republic, and we went back to our Latin script. So now it's like Spanish or Italian, it's a Latin language, Romanian. And I remember that for him that was a great day. I think that was one of the happiest days of his life. I probably can compare it with the birth of my children, but not many days like that. Well, for me it was a historical day, but it was a day. I'm trying to tell you that there are people who can make a life from fighting for something. It can be a small thing, but that will be their purpose in life. And some people can be in the midst of all the important events in the world, and they will not feel anything, because this is how their structure is. They adapt easier, or they have no courage, or they have no desire. So for me, the language is important because it links me to my family, it links to my family past, but I don't have the same attitude. And now being in Paris, I must confess that sometimes I see my children speaking French, English, a little bit of Romanian, some Russian. We sometimes make games, sometimes we experiment with words and making jokes, which only we understand. And for them, language is an instrument. It's just an instrument of communication. And then if I would try to tell them these stories about my father, they will probably not understand. They'll say, it's a language, so what? You changed, you didn't change, it's another one. For some people, that is not part of their identity. Maybe for them, identity means that they are born in one village and they live there all their lives. But some people carry a language with them everywhere they go, in all countries, in all years, everywhere. So being part of a family who had both ways, like having a father like mine, but then having children, a life I have, I think that for me, language is a survival skill. And it's a tool which makes me connect with people, but I wouldn't make a house of it, you know, I wouldn't make a temple of it. And yes, this is how it is. I mean, yeah.
Sí, y entiendo que eso justamente es contra lo que lucha la protagonista del Jardín de Vidrio. Bueno, hemos comentado que ambos libros tratan las relaciones materno-filiales. En el segundo libro, en El Jardín de Vidrio, el personaje principal es una huérfana. Es curioso también que estemos presentando este libro aquí en la térmica. Es una huérfana que es adoptada, y ahora pondría unas comillas, es adoptada por una señora rusa. Veo en esa niña que va creciendo, veo a tu padre, veo a esa persona que se va construyendo a través de la lengua, ¿no? Y que la utiliza como herramienta, ¿no? Para sobrevivir y para definirse. Yo había notado que me parece bellísimo, me parece muy orgánico, también me parece muy doloroso cómo construís la relación de, pero, corrígeme si lo digo mal, la stoica, perdón, de la protagonista, lo diremos así, con el moldavo, con el ruso, con el rumano, ¿no? Es como si se desarrollaran afectos y relaciones paralelas entre ella y cada una de las lenguas. Yo lo sentía como si ella las utilizara para preguntarse quién es exactamente, pero nunca pudiera acercarse a la respuesta. Siempre hay una trampa. Me da la impresión de que en tus novelas siempre nos vas dejando trampas. Y esta trampa en concreto es que la protagonista piensa que está andando hacia adelante, pero no sabe lo que es lo que tiene delante, ¿no? Podría estar andando hacia atrás y no darse cuenta. Y hay un momento en la novela, y pienso que revelador, y que ilustra muy bien lo que estoy intentando explicar, y es el momento en el que el personaje de Galia, que es una vendedora, le pregunta a la huérfana algo aparentemente ingenuo, pero que ella nunca se había preguntado. Y cuando hace esta pregunta, se da cuenta de que todo el mundo a su alrededor durante su vida se lo había estado preguntando, ¿no? Y esta es esa pregunta que te decía antes que te iba a hacer, que no era una pregunta, sino un gran elogio, ¿no? Porque tú como lectora estás dentro de la novela, de las novelas de Tatiana, y piensas que ya hay muchos temas sobre la mesa y que ya hay muchas pistas, ¿no? Que te van a llevar a algunos lugares en los que va a haber una respuesta. Y de repente, en un momento en el que ya aparentemente está todo resuelto, Tatiana lanza la bomba, ¿no? No sé si puedo decir la pregunta que le hace por si es un gran spoiler. ¿Puedo decirla? ¿No? Vale, no la digo. No la digo. No la digo porque habéis tenido poquito tiempo para leerla, pero... ¿Sí? Vale. Bueno, con esto quiero decir que no es una pregunta, es un elogio, ¿no? Que consigue desamparar no solo al personaje, sino también al lector, ¿no? Y me parece que eso es una cosa muy, muy difícil de hacer y que lo haces de una manera magnífica. He anotado un par de frases, que no son spoilers, sobre la lengua. Una es: volví a casa llorando con la antigua lengua muerta, enroscada en torno a mí. Si la perdía con tanta facilidad, ¿para qué había luchado tanto por ella? Tengo aquí otra frase que dice: había olvidado todas las lenguas, solo me quedaba el grito. ¿Qué es para ti el grito?
I don't have a wise answer now about the screen, but I will tell you this. At one point, when I started traveling more for the books, I felt that I feel much better to speak in English or in a foreign language about my books than in Romania. And it's weird, isn't it? Because why would your language be more difficult to speak than English or Russian or French? My French is rubbish, but still it's there. And I understood that a language can be a barrier, you know, a protection. It's like a fence. you say that I'm not English, but I do speak English. And person near you will know that if you make a mistake, it's still good because you make an effort to speak a foreign language. While if you speak your language and you make a mistake, people will think automatically that you are stupid. And that happened, sorry. And that happens a lot to people who were born in Moldova and are part of this generation which I'm talking in the book. I don't know what's this. It's not COVID on the book. Because there are people who find that they don't speak well any language. And that is very embarrassing and very humiliating when you think that your language, it's too difficult for you. Because what happened in Moldova is that this Moldovan language, which was invented for the people on that territory just to keep us apart from Romania and from the rest of the world, it was a sort of language for silly people, you know? Imagine a drunk person, and then he speaks, and that becomes a language. And you know it's not true, but you still are obliged to speak it, and you are putting it in the books, and you go to school, and children learn it, and then you learn it for 10 years, you come out of school, and you think that this is the correct language because you are the best at literature, for instance. But then in 10 years, you find out that that language not only it's not correct, but it's false and it's disgraceful, and you need immediately to forget it, and you need completely to say, okay, I'm separating myself from this language. But what do you do with your childhood? What do you do with your memories? My father was always telling me that I'm a traitor because I don't hate Russians and I don't hate Russia. And the time was right to do that because, you know, when we declared independence, it's impossible not to understand what happened to us because of that Soviet regime. But I found out that lots of my memories are in Russian because I was a child. I would go out, we would have playgrounds, we would have birthday parties, we would have songs and poems, and everything was in Russian then. So what do I do with that? Do I cut that part of my life completely, or how do I continue? And for me, I took the decision that I need to separate the language from the politics, the language of literature, the language of theater, the language of ballet, the language of so many things I love. I should just completely separate it from what's happening and what happened in past, because otherwise you just feel that your life is worthless. You lived a life which doesn't make sense. And how do you tell this to people? How do you make them feel good about themselves if you tell them that most of their lives is fraud? So I think that, yes, I constantly need to negotiate with my past, the past of my family and who I am now.
Volvamos a las atmósferas que creas. En las dos atmósferas, en las dos novelas, la atmósfera es densa, es pegajosa. Mientras leemos, a veces nos cuesta de respirar, aunque hayamos dejado atrás ya dos canículas y estemos en uno de esos inviernos tan fríos y tan duros. Pienso que con la segunda novela sucede algo que es impredecible. Pero yo con la primera estaba convencida de que era muy difícil superar esa atmósfera, superar esa angustia. Y no solo sucede eso, sino que sucede también que las herramientas que tú como lectora te has construido para transitar esa primera novela no te sirven para transitar la segunda. Yo sé que, porque lo he leído en alguna entrevista, o igual han mentido porque los periodistas muchas veces mienten mucho, pero en la entrevista decía que tú habías dicho que cuando escribes no tienes en cuenta al lector. Pero hay una intención en esa creación de atmósferas, hay una intención en mantenerlo alerta y en ocasiones asqueado. Y otra pregunta, ¿cómo se consigue asfixiar la asfixia?
I didn't lie about saying that. They didn't invent it, no. I think...
no digo tú, digo el periodista.
No, they didn't lie. I really said that because it's true. Actually, when I'm writing, I'm not thinking about the readers, because when I start doing that, I just kill that writing, you know. When I wrote the first book, as I said before, I didn't think about it being published, or I didn't know it's going to be successful. But then I wrote the second book. I was very conscious about it. And it was much more difficult to write it because I was thinking about what the critics will say, what the readers will say, what my mom will say, what my dad will say, what my neighbors will say. And that just stops you because you are not yourself, you know, you can't just be yourself. You just think about everyone else. And then it's false as well, because if you want to please Maria and Tamara and whatever people you know, they will read the book, it means that you are already writing a sort of, you know, like command, I don't know how to say, yeah. I think that for me, writing, it's a very selfish act. It's the moment of the day where I feel useful. I know that if I didn't do anything well in that day, but if I'm managing to write a good page, it was worth it. You know, that day meant something. And I always start from emotion. I never start from story. When I was writing the first book, El Verano, I know that people don't believe it, but it's true. I probably wrote already like 10 chapters, and I didn't realize that I'm talking with the voice of a man in book, because I'm writing it from a man's perspective. And why did I do that? I don't know. Probably because there are some things that are very tough towards women, which I couldn't say if I would be a woman. I don't know. It's funny because my first review in France, for instance, it was from my psychiatry magazine. And I said, okay, so that is a good sign. If psychiatrists are writing about my book, it's clearly something there. So I probably hid myself in that personage. I wanted to be a man. I wrote about a mother, even if I'm a woman, and the problem was with my father, not with my mom. So you see, when you're writing, you just don't care so much about who will take a shape of his character. You just want to say what you need to say, and then it can be a dog or a woman or a door or whatever. You just find a box where you just deposit the emotion. That is, for me at least. I'm never following a story. At one point I didn't know what to do with Alexei. Maybe he should have died, I thought. Maybe I should kill him as well, or maybe I couldn't make the mother alive again, so I had to think about the other characters. But that was not so important, you know. People ask me, why did I choose cancer? Because I needed a disease which kills fast, I suppose. You can't have a personage dying of diabetes, for instance, in a summer. So it might seem ruthless what I'm saying, but for me it wasn't important what they do. For me, I needed to say those phrases, those things, and whatever form came to me, I just took it.
Vamos con Alexei, pues. Alexei es el protagonista de El verano en que mi madre tuvo los ojos verdes. Como hemos dicho, las dos novelas tratan relaciones materno-filiales. En este caso, la madre es la madre biológica de Alexei, tiene un cáncer y pasan un último verano juntos que es maravilloso. A mí me sorprendió muchísimo, yo creo que también fue uno de los elementos que me hicieron sucumbir a tu novela, que Alexi acabara convirtiéndose en un pintor, ¿no? Yo, como pintora, el hecho de que Alexi, a través de esa disciplina, encontrara lugares seguros, que además le permitieron vivir una vida holgada, que es inalcanzable para la mayoría, bueno, hizo que mi interés en la obra creciera todavía más. Alexi tenía problemas psicológicos. En la pintura, además de ser un espacio de revelación, en el que la locura no se ve como una tara, sino como un privilegio, ¿no? Yo lo leía y veía como una iluminación. Nos sirve a las que leemos para entender una cosa que muchas veces es muy difícil de explicar. Yo doy clases de pintura y me empeño mucho en intentar explicarlo. Lo importante del proceso y, sobre todo, el cuestionar la belleza, aquello que nos han dicho que es bello, ¿no? Me parece maravillosa también la literalidad de Alexi en el momento de traducir las imágenes. Tatiana crea unas metáforas brutales y con las palabras muy pictóricas y muy potentes, pero que si se traducen de manera literal a la pintura, provocan una sensación muy extraña, ¿no? He anotado, cuando se pintan se inflan, golpean, se hacen todavía más asquerosas cuando las vemos representadas plásticamente. Me encantaría saber cuál es tu relación con la pintura, cómo la colocas en relación con la escritura y si piensas que una puede ser alimento de la otra y viceversa.
If I have to make a sort of top scale of what's for me more important, like music or painting or writing, definitely writing is at the bottom, because in order to write something you need to know language, and then you need to have a person who speaks your language. Because if you're writing in Chinese and then the person near you it's Romanian, you achieve nothing because you can't talk. But then you have music and you have paintings. It's different. You don't need to speak. It's just like an open channel of emotion, you know. So you just can be both standing in front of a painting and you will understand each other, because you will immediately know, do I like this person? Do I understand that she's unhappy or happy, or she wants me, or you will understand. With writing is different. If you don't have a good translator, the book is dead. If you, as I said, if the person doesn't speak the language, the book is dead. So for me, probably this, I made Alexi a painter because this was another code. Probably I wanted him to be universal. Everything about my first novel needed to be universal. As I was telling you before, I hid myself in everything possible, so I erased all my traces. I didn't want people to know who I am. I was not there. I was not important, so it was only this boy and his mama. And the mother doesn't even have a name. It's just the mother, because I didn't want this story to be about a certain, I don't know, a certain social class. I didn't want them to be poor or rich. I just wanted them to be so universal, and the thing could happen anytime, in any place. So the paintings are probably from that perspective something which, you know, it's the easiest form to understand craziness, I think. And I know it's also true, because I know lots of people who did therapy through painting, especially after they had a mental problem. And yes, and I think it's a form of art where craziness is not considered bad. The more crazy you are, better you paint, I suppose. And I found that wonderful. And I can't paint, unfortunately, but if I could, I would probably paint the things which I described in my book. And I will tell you one of my secret dreams linked to this novel. I always hoped that there is going to be a painter who will read this book and will want to paint those things I described. So it didn't happen yet, but maybe it will.
Yo leía la novela y quería pintar esas pinturas. Y eso también es
I found the painter.
Acabas de decir que la madre de Alexi no tiene nombre. Era la siguiente pregunta. Iba a hablar de la muerte. La muerte está muy presente en ambas novelas. En El verano es la de la madre de Alexi, una mujer sin nombre. La degradación y la muerte de esta mujer, que necesita en sus últimos meses de vida hacer las paces con un hijo al que apenas ha querido, ¿no? Al que ha brindado muy pocos afectos. También hay otra muerte importante, que no diremos quién es. Y en la segunda novela aparecen muchas muertes también, y las muertes van apareciendo como, van cayendo como gotitas, ¿no? Como hablabas de la música antes. Me imaginaba que las muertas iban marcando un ritmo, ¿no? En hitos, ¿no? en la vida de la protagonista. Morían personas en momentos importantes. No voy a seguir tampoco para no deciros nada que no tengáis que saber todavía. Pero Alexi en El verano dice: querría poder morir con sencillez, con comodidad, deprisa. Quería que la muerte se doblegara a mi voluntad. Yo quería preguntarte cuál es tu relación con la muerte y si cuando escribes te relacionas de manera diferente a ella que en tu vida cotidiana.
I'm not scared of death. I've never been scared of death. I grew up with lots of old people around me. My grandparents were very old when I met them because my mom was born as an extremely late child, and then I lived in Chisinau in a very small courtyard where nearly everyone was very old. My father was much older than my mom, so I'm used to have around me old people, and old people speak about death a lot. So for me, death was like something which will for sure happen to you. And from what I remember from my grandmother's tales is, not tales, but talks with other women from the village. I'm more scared of sickness. I'm scared to be a burden for my family. I'm scared to be dying of a disease which will deform me and make my children be ashamed of me. I'm scared of being that kind of, sort of half corpse in the house, because I've seen that as well. My grandfather was paralyzed for many years, and I remember my grandmother, whom she loved him a lot, and they've been sent to Gulag together. They've been to Siberia, and they came back, and then he paralyzed at home when the life was nice finally. And I remember that room where he was living, and she was always going to that room, and her face would always change when she would go to that room. And it was something between, like at the beginning she would probably pray for him to become better, and then she would pray for him to die, because living as a, half alive is not the best thing, especially in those times. And I remember having this thing in the back of my mind: I don't want people to pray for me to die. I want to die before they start praying for me to die. And I speak about death very easily. I don't think that is the worst thing that can happen. Especially that I think that people, even if most of them will say that is not true, but I think people feel that they will die soon. Usually people, when they, unless it's an accident or something, you have this feeling. You have a feeling that you approach the moment when you won't be part of this world. And I think that it's something also good because you start preparing in a way for whatever it's called, the life after. Maybe you forgive some people, maybe you give more money for charity, maybe you become less bitchy, you know, and you become a better person. I don't know, people have different ways of going towards the death. But I don't think this is the worst thing that can happen. So why do I put death in my novels, you ask? Because I think that that is something which for sure will happen. And I think that at one point the mother is telling Alexei that, you know, you shouldn't be scared of death because that is something which will happen for sure, and more than that, it will happen instead of most of your dreams, because the dreams might never come true, but death will be there. So I think that if you have a healthy attitude towards this thing, it can be actually like a friend, you know, you have the death there, walking through life, making peace, knowing that it's going to be there. So yes, I'm not afraid of that, and I think that that's why I'm putting it in a way like, you know, people, yeah, they live and then they die, but something stays after them.
Y leyendo sus novelas queda esa sensación y esa también belleza de la muerte. En el verano hay un sentido del humor muy, bueno, es atroz, es ácido, te hace sentir mal, porque te ríes y te sientes mal, ¿no? por haberte reído de algo tan siniestro, ¿no? O de algo tan bestia. No digo que bueno, y está lleno de poesía también, está plagadísimo de imágenes muy, muy potentes, muy pictóricas. No digo que en el jardín no haya poesía, hay varias escenas, hay muchas escenas bellas, pero hay un par precioso en el que la mirada se impone, los juegos de luces, los verdes, los cristales, es realmente bellísimo. Pero sí que parece que haya renunciado en parte en esta segunda novela a ese humor ácido y a esa poesía. Las botellas son un símbolo, son un elemento, son un objeto importantísimo en la novela. Están presentes a lo largo de toda la narración y de la misma manera provocan lo mismo que muchos de los personajes, ¿no? O muchas de las situaciones. Las botellas provocan llagas, náuseas, vómitos, dolor de espalda, malformaciones y al mismo tiempo provocan algo bellísimo, ¿no? Que es esta educación en esta mirada. También provocan cosas muy desagradables vinculadas con el dinero, que es otro de los temas que tratas en tus novelas y que en el jardín aparece como algo doloroso para la protagonista. ¿Es importante para ti poner el dedo en esa llaga, en la necesidad de observar una misma cosa desde tantos lugares diferentes?
I think they are very different. Very different books, as I said before. The second novel coincided with a different period in my life, I think. But in first novel, I was a mother of a small child still, and I was always afraid to be a bad mother, even if I'm, you know, I think that I'm a little bit a paranoid mother because I'm just suffocating them probably with my love and with my, I want them to love me and need me all the time, which is crazy, but that will pass, I hope, in future. While the second novel, it was a very feminist novel. It's full with women's characters, and probably because in the first book I have only 2 characters and I'm a man in that book. In the second novel I wanted to take this revenge and I became a woman and I spoke about women. But it's also true that I grew up in a society where women, they're all the time present, you know. I was asked many times, why don't I have strong male characters in my second novel? The answer is I don't know why, but I was just describing the way I grew up, and everywhere you would look, it would be a woman. You know, the women went to work, they were cooking, they were washing, they were taking care of children, of homeworks, and men, they were there. I had a father, you know, but they were so precious and so rare that you wouldn't really understand what are they doing and why don't you see them more. And then it was also a period when I somehow, my children are a little bit grown up now, so I felt that, okay, that is a chapter which I dealt with in a way. So I'm a woman now, so what do I do with me? I have 10 extra kilos, I have 10 extra years, I have you know, lots of frustrations, but I'm still a sort of youngish woman. I'm 40. So who I am, how about my sexuality, how about my needs, how about me as a woman? And before that, I was never interested in that. But in this book, you could see that there is a lot of talk about that, about the body, about the flesh, about what do women do after they have 2 children and they still want to be loved and seen as, you know, a nice woman, but you are instead seen as a feeding machine, for instance. So I think that without wanting to write specifically about these matters, I did. And that says something about me as a writer in this moment, probably. I'm not excluding the fact that my next book, when it will come, or it might never come, it will go even deeper, because I'm changing, you know. So at the beginning, I thought that I will always write about unicorns and porridges, but now things changed. And I think literature is just a mirror of who we are at that moment.
Vamos a hablar de mujeres omnipresentes y de los personajes masculinos. Vamos a ir poquito a poquito porque aquí tenemos un tema denso para desarrollar. Pero empiezo con una pregunta directa sobre el hecho de ser mujer. ¿Hay más rabia en el segundo libro que en el primero?
I think women generally, in that times and in that part of the world where I was growing up, have more troubles than European women and we today, right? Because it was lots of violence, it was lots of poverty, it was lots of exploitation, and the society always put a lot of pressure on women because you had to be up to standards in everything. I don't know if that is the case in Spain, but in Moldova, for instance, and Romania and Russia as well, once you've been married, your role as a woman is a little bit finished, so you now have to be a mother. So the motherhood steps in your life and it doesn't leave. Everything you will do, it will be seen through this angle, you know, how good mother you are. If your children are not behaving well at school, is because you are a bad mother. If they are dirty, it's because you are a bad mother. If they are stupid, it's for the same reason, you know. So for women, it's a huge, huge pressure to be good mothers. But that creates also a lot of unhappiness, because it seems that if you don't have children, you don't exist as a woman at one point. That is also not true, because you can have a life without children. And then how about being a busy mother? What happens to those women, you know? How about the women with careers? And I felt that it was much more difficult then than now. Even now, when my mom comes to visit me, she will find faults in everything I'm doing. And I think that I'm doing well in life, but she will say, you're not cooking as you should, your husband is coming soon, why don't you cook for him this, for instance, if he likes it, okay, but he can eat that, or why don't you do something with the children now? So she has this pressure still now, and she's nearly 70. And I feel that I'm better than her. But if I compare myself to young women now, I'm not better, I'm worse than her, because I'm the same. And I think that there is a trauma and a prejudice which you pass from generation to generation, and that could be stopped only from a mother to her child. And I'm not talking about only girls, because, you know, I have a girl and a boy. So I'm not raising them differently. I'm using the same procedures. I'm telling them the same things. And I want my son to know that he needs to respect a woman as I would like to be respected myself. Or I think it's easier now from some points of view, and but unfortunately there are lots of places in the world where the situation is maybe even worse than it was in my country 40 years ago, and we need to acknowledge that as well.
Vamos a hablar de la carne, entonces. Yo leía El jardín de vidrio y veía mucha carne de muchas mujeres, ¿no? Y veía muchos cuerpos que, como tú bien dices, llegaba un momento en el que las medias ya eran otras, ¿no? Ya tenías que ponerte medias de madre, ya no podías exhibirte de la misma manera. Muchos cuerpos sufrientes, cuerpos mutilados. Veía nuestros cuerpos como un lugar en el que se libraban batallas que no eran nuestras. Voy a leer un fragmento muy breve de la página 218 que dice lo siguiente. Cada día iba a casa de Caterina. Después del aborto, Katia apenas salía de casa y tenía las piernas siempre vendadas. No hablé nunca con ella sobre lo sucedido aquella noche. Tamara Pavlovna me dijo que eso mismo me pasaría a mí si dejaba a los hombres meterse dentro. Sumé 2 más 2 y entendí que Caterina había intentado librarse de un embarazo no deseado, introduciendo las piernas en agua hirviendo. Pero creo que Katiuska había hecho algo más. La sangre había manado a chorros, se había martirizado demasiado. Deformaciones, mutilaciones, abusos, compra, violaciones, sangre. ¿Necesitabas que nuestros cuerpos ocuparan ese espacio tan grande en la obra? ¿Con qué intención colocas tanta carne en estas páginas?
Nothing which I put in that book was invented. Not everything happened to me. I didn't write an autobiographical book. So, of course, some things in the book are my memories, right? Like about school and things and friendships, and this girl, Marichika, who died. She was one of my friends who died, this silly thing when she was just a girl. But I couldn't write a book without talking about rapes. The rapes were so often at that time. I remember I was, 11 or 12, and our mothers were dressing us in a sort of ugly, long dresses, because it was something very often that a car with black, windows would stop in the front of school, and some man would grab a girl from school and rape her in the car, not even going far away from the school, because that was this crazy transitional times where the killings and rapes were happening there. And I don't think that was the worst, but the fact is that if a girl of 15 would be raped, it wouldn't ever be the raper's fault. It would be always her fault, because she probably didn't dress properly, she didn't say something properly, she didn't answer properly, everything. She had breasts which are too big, whatever, but it would never be someone else's fault, a man's fault, So I'm not demonizing men, because that is not, I'm happily married, and I don't divide world in men and women, but I'm just saying that part of history, it happened, and I can't now reinvent it. So I put rape there because it was something so often happening in that part of the world. And I was asked, why did you need the rape after all this unhappiness in her life? And why couldn't you make it a happy ending somehow? And I said, well, for me it is a happy ending. She is becoming a doctor, she has a daughter. I can't do happy endings, or I can't make a sort of this Hollywoodian, ending to my books, because I feel that life is not like that. You rarely find a destiny which is sad, and then suddenly something so nice happens that you want to rewrite completely the story. So I'm doing my best. I'm trying to let light in my writing, but maybe not always very successfully.
Hablando de hombres y mujeres y de manera de relacionarse entre hombres y mujeres, y otra vez de maternidades, que ya hemos dicho que es una de las materia prima, ¿no?, de la que partes cuando escribes, me gustaría hablar del amor y de algo que has dicho hace un momento, ¿no?
I'm very bad with love.
No.
You should skip this
algo que has dicho hace un momento sobre cómo le dices a tu hijo que sea buena persona, ¿no?, y que sepa amar. En el verano, en que mi madre tuvo los ojos verdes, la madre, esta mujer sin nombre, moribunda, ya muy avanzada la narración, le dice a su hijo: aprende también tú a amar a una mujer, Alexi, no seas como tu padre, seco y baboso y malo, tienes que ser un hombre bueno. Y en el jardín le dicen a la protagonista: con el amor no te compliques, no corras tras él, no lo incites, porque no le gusta. Si te sale al camino, agáchate y guárdalo en el bolsillo. Si no, no lo busques por tu cuenta. No le coloques una corona en la frente, no le levantes un monumento. No se merece tantas palabras con todo el daño que ha causado en este mundo. Recuerda lo que te digo, el amor, todos gimen, discuten, gastan dinero. Un asesino, eso es el amor. Porque aquel que no ama, ¿qué hace? Vive, trabaja, es persona. Y sigue, ¿vale? Y sigue hablando desde este lugar sobre el amor. ¿Piensas que llamamos amor a algo que en realidad no es amor?
Well, I think that love is one of the most beautiful but also dangerous feelings. I mean, you rely on your intelligence and your, all your capacities in many other things in life, but when it comes to love, you just lose your head, I suppose. I never did, in the sense of, I'm probably a quite cold person, so for me, I need to love with a reason, and that's why probably some would say that I never really loved. I don't know. That's why I love Spanish people, because they love with their, with everything. But I find love one of the most important things in love in life, especially for children. That's why I'm going back to this maternidad all the time. I think that a child can live in poverty, and he can lack lots of things, but if he knows that he's loved, he will conquer everything, while a very rich child can have everything he wants. But if he feels abandoned, nothing makes sense. And if he feels that he doesn't have that kind of hug of his parents, that is the main lesson for a person in life, that you are loved first by your mother. Sorry for dad's presence here, but I think that maternal love is a sort of genetical code, which, if you can only give that to your children, you've done a lot. And that's why I said in Verano, I think at one point, that the mother tells Alexi, look, I loved you as much as I could, the best way I could. Maybe it's not enough. Maybe you will think that I could have done more, but this is maximum I can have. And that is a perfect answer for a child, because if he knows that you did your best, it's already something which he can carry in life, something he can say, look, maybe I don't have much, but I have the love of my mom and of my father and of my family. So yes, I think love, it will always be part of my books, but maybe it's not that kind of sexual love and lust. I'm not good at that. I was always scared to describe even a kiss in a book because I think that I will be so ridiculous. So I'm trying not to go down that road. Maybe when I will be 55 or something, I will write a book about sexuality. But until then, I will focus on this.
También las elipsis y lo que no dices está muy bien resuelto. Hablábamos de todas las figuras femeninas que inundan con su carne y con sus historias el jardín de vidrio, ¿no? Y de cómo a mí me ha encantado la novela porque he visto representada la feminidad desde lugares dispares, ¿no? Siempre parece que cuando nosotras aparecemos en las novelas solo podemos representar un tipo de mujer. Y en el jardín de vidrio hay muchas mujeres de muchas edades con bagajes muy distintos, con experiencias muy distintas, incluso con las maternidades, ¿no? La que no quiere ser madre y se queda embarazada, la que quiere ser madre y no puede serlo, la que adopta pero compra, ¿no? Y luego cada una con cómo tiene que tener también esa vergüenza de su cuerpo, ¿no? Cuando lavan las compresas a escondidas. Es un libro en el que realmente entiendes en qué buen momento estamos las mujeres que escribimos, porque todavía nos tenemos que narrar desde muchísimos lugares. Me parece, iba a decir curioso, pero no es curioso, cómo resuelves las figuras masculinas, ¿no? Hay muy pocas figuras masculinas con poder en tu novela, en tu segunda novela. Yo las veo como si fueran sombras, ¿no? Como si fueran bocanadas de humo. En el verano, Alexi escribe: la idea de mi padre me hacía vomitar, o mi padre, para mi felicidad, no apareció. El resto de los hombres son borrachos. Durante largo tiempo de la novela son alcohólicos. Hay uno que hace una acción buena, pero de modo excepcional, y vuelve otra vez a timar a la gente, ¿no? Que es lo que mejor hace. Y mientras esas figuras femeninas son tan sólidas, tan contundentes, también en sus defectos, también en sus taras, los personajes masculinos son huidizos, llorones, temerosos. Parece que estén rotos, ¿no? De hecho, algunos aparecen rotos literalmente. Les faltan fragmentos del cuerpo. Pero también hay algunos que están rotos moralmente, ¿no? Porque abusan del poder que le da la cátedra. Los veo, y ahora perdonad esta metáfora burda, pero en la segunda novela como si fueran una horda de zombies borrachos, ¿no? Cuya única función fuera ocupar un espacio, ¿no? Pero al mismo tiempo es de donde Tamara consigue beneficiarse, ¿no? Consigue enriquecerse. Hay una intención en colocar a los hombres en ese otro lugar que habitualmente ocupamos nosotras, en ese, no voy a ser tan simple, no voy a decir en ese hombre único, porque tampoco son únicos en tus novelas, pero hay una intención en nombrar cómo somos de poliédricas, ¿no? Cómo es de compleja nuestra experiencia.
Well, you intrigued me because I don't remember writing so badly about men, so I need to check what Marianne translated into Spanish. Maybe she wrote herself certain pages. I don't try to make men, bad and women good. As you could see, my women are all good and bad because I think every person has black and white. So, in fact, I'm scared of perfect people because something is wrong with those people. You can't just be good all the time. And I think that the men in the second novel, basically the men I know and I grew up with. I didn't want to invent a nice man character as in, a very memorable character because I didn't really have them around me when I grew up, but I think Zahar, with the teller of a book, the one which has no leg and no arm because he came from the Soviet war, is one of my favorites because I put in his mouth everything I wanted to say about, I don't know, about love, fear, writing. At one point he says about this beauty of crazy people who need to talk and to say, tell stories. Because I feel like that. I think my father was like that. So in a way, I invented the heart just to put in him lots of thoughts. But I'm not excluding the fact that next book will be only with men. I'm not thinking about gender balance in my books or political correctness. I think this is rubbish, to be honest. That if you think that you need to have a balance in your writing, then you killed the book. Because if you're balancing your feelings, it will be no atmosphere. Every book is built up on something. So some books are sad, some books are happy, some books are motivational. I'm thinking about the feeling more than about are they going to count how many men or women, how good the men are and how bad the women. I mean, I'm not thinking about that, no.
Sí. En ningún momento he visto que las mujeres sean buenas y los hombres sean malos. Quizá no lo he expresado bien. De hecho, hablo de todas las taras que tienen también todas las mujeres que aparecen en el libro y de los hombres como una sombra, porque apenas aparecen, apenas tienen protagonismo. La pregunta iba más en la dirección de saber si esa carne de mujer, que es la que acaba protagonizando el libro, todas esas historias que habitualmente están en las tinieblas, todas esas historias sobre el deseo de estar embarazada, el perder a un hijo, el parir a un hijo muerto, el querer perder a un hijo, ¿no? Los dolores las agresiones que muchas mujeres acaban cometiendo sobre sí mismas, ¿no? que son temas que habitualmente no solemos leer en la literatura. Tenías una intención de hacerlo, de visibilizarlo. No, en ningún momento he visto hombres malos y mujeres buenas. Hay mujeres buenas y malas y hombres buenos y malos. Lo único que hay pocas figuras masculinas. Yo tengo una última pregunta y no sé si podemos pasar, no sé si el público puede hacer preguntas o acabamos aquí. ¿Alguien me puede responder? ¿No hay nadie? Vale, pues te hago la última pregunta.
I must tell you that at home I'm sleeping for like 3 hours already. So I feel very young today, being in Malaga, being awake at this time, having a conversation. So it's something very new for me.
Bueno, pues una última pregunta de jóvenes. Okay. ¿Escribir duele?
Does it hurt to write? Yes and no. I mean, it's a pleasure, but it's also when I started writing, I thought I was always answering that it's only a pleasure, but then it wasn't a pleasure only. And then for a while I said that I don't want to do this anymore because suddenly I found myself under the attention of many people and I didn't know what to do with it. You know, some people work all their lives for success, but sometimes success comes like that in 3 years, and then from someone unknown you become popular and you are invited to places like that, and then you have to talk about yourself, and I'm terrified to talk about myself because I think my life is quite simple and boring, and people think that maybe it's very interesting because they like my books, but it's not. I'm a very normal woman, mother. Actually, I'm quite a lot of mother, I think too much. So I thought that if writing is doing this to me, maybe I should not write anymore. But then I see that I'm still happy when I'm writing, you know, so I don't feel pain. I feel it's a moment of, how shall I say, of importance for myself. I have my own time, I have my own playground. I write and I do what I want. I can invent people, I can avoid deaths, and I can create life. So it's something which I like doing, because where else if not there in writing?
Pues yo solo puedo agradecerte tu generosidad, que nos hayas acompañado y que, bueno, supongo que pensáis y sentís lo mismo que yo, ¿no? La fortuna de poder tener aquí a Tatiana. Queremos que haya una siguiente novela y muchas más, y no puedo aportar nada más que mi agradecimiento.
Thank you very much for patience, for invitation, and I think I feel very lucky that I had a presenter like Paula, which really did a fantastic job. I'm very honored that you read my book in the way you did, and it was a joy all these days in Malaga, and I really want to say thank you for the translators. They did a great job. Usually I'm pretending that I speak better Spanish, so I don't listen, but this time I really enjoyed. It was fast and effective, so thank you.
Gracias. Y gracias a todas y a todos los que habéis venido. Buenas noches.
De Moldova, face acum prezentare și la autora. De unde din din Escenario. Ești aici, Malaga? Da, mă vine de câțiva ani aici, Malaga, și mi-am văzut pastor pozitiv să ajung la dumneavoastră. M-ați încântat și... Eu că am venit că venía sin hacer los deberes. En el texto de dumneavoastră, de Moldova. Todavía no, pero ahí mi vida. Sí. Pero la verdad que ahora le tengo ganas a Añusoara. Pues bien, bueno. Parece que va a tener nuestra París. Moldova, da. Moldova n-a fost pe care. În casă mai mama. Wow. Ok, sunteți mai cunoscută în afara tehnică. Nu, Moldova sunt foarte cunoscută, dar mi-a dat de ideea asta. Nu am facem acolo. Seara bună. What is your name? Well, it's not for me, it's for my mom. It's for your mom. Okay. So what is your mom's name? Carmen. Okay. I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Can you sign outside the room, because we are going to
aquí ya.